Mr. President, what this amendment does is support the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, freedom of speech, to prohibit censorship of federal agencies and federal employees from speaking in scientific terms about the oceans, the weather, the atmospheres, and the climate. Now, you would think, Mr. President, that this is so common sense and so understood under our freedom of speech in our United States Constitution. But we have all read news reports at the state level, at the local level, maybe even at the federal level, that indeed some folks are trying to muzzle scientists from speaking about the science involving the oceans, the atmosphere, climate, and the weather. I have the privilege of knowing something about the space program, and when I hear people saying that they don't want NASA to get involved in climate, well, NASA builds the satellites, NASA launches the satellites, but then NOAA in the Department of Commerce operates these weather satellites. Other satellites that are taking measurements of the Earth to understand what is happening to our atmosphere, what is happening to our climate. Mr. President, when I start talking about the atmosphere, I can't help but flash back 29 and a half years ago, looking out the window of a spacecraft back at our planet and looking at the rim of the Earth and seeing the thin little film that is the atmosphere that sustains all of our life. And there's a lot about it that we don't know. There's a lot about it that we, in fact, can measure scientifically. And yet, for some reason, there is some commentary going on in America today that we want to muzzle our scientists. So, this amendment is a simple little common sense amendment that says you can't muzzle a federal agency or a federal employee telling them that they can't use their First Amendment right of freedom of speech to speak in scientific terms about the oceans, the weather, the atmosphere, and the climate. Now, can you imagine if we were going to muzzle researchers at the National Institute of Health and censor them, saying that they couldn't use medical terms like asthma, cancer? What if that was off limits? I mean, that's not even a question that we would consider. Last week, when you get into the matter of climate, a study suggested that the massive Antarctic glacier is melting. The water from that melting glacier will impact global sea levels, potentially raising them by 10 feet. And this week, researchers tell us that the melting of Greenland's ice sheet is slowing the cyclical ocean current that drives the warm Gulf Stream, which comes right along the southeastern coast of my state and goes out through the middle of the Atlantic and warms parts of Western Europe. And so, to understand that, it's critical that we have this information, which has the potential to impact all of us, no matter where we live. Mr. President, At times of seasonal high tide, the streets of Miami Beach are flooded. The mayor of Miami Beach campaigned in a kayak on Alton Road, which is on the west side of the city of Miami Beach, campaigned in a kayak at the time of seasonal high flood, paddling in a kayak about what the city needed to do because of what NASA scientists tell us and have testified to our Commerce Committee. Not forecast, not projections, measurements of the rise of the sea level in South Florida over the course of the last 45 years. 6 to 8 inches. Not forecast, measurements. So, do we want to muzzle that NASA scientist, who, by the way, in this case that testified to us, is also a NASA astronaut? We want to muzzle him? And so scientists simply must have the tools and the ability to tell us what they observe without limitation on the terms that they can speak. So let's make clear that public science cannot be muzzled, that we won't support censorship, and that the taxpayers deserve an honest return on their investment. Mr. President, I yield the floor.